Guys, we are currently a little over 1 month from Life is Strange Double Exposure. From the time I'm making this video, about 47 days. Life is Strange Double Exposure drops next month on October 29th, which means that between now and then, we are about to see a major increase in marketing for the game. You can fully expect more teasers, trailers, and news to come, but for now, for this video, I want to focus on the new gameplay that we got to see at PAX West 2024 and break down all of the new information that was recently revealed about the game. Felice Kwan and Jonathan Stauder, narrative director and game director for Life is Strange Double Exposure, were featured on the interactive panel at PAX and showcased approximately 40 minutes of gameplay, allowing the audience to pitch in and make decisions on behalf of Max. While we did get our first look at gameplay during the reveal livestream back in June, the interactive panel offered a much more in-depth look at the game's systems, especially Max's power and how it actually works. Felicia and Jonathan also answered a lot of questions and dropped some really cool tidbits about Max and what we can expect to see once the game is in our hands. We have so much to cover, so let's get into it. At the beginning of the gameplay, we catch a glimpse of the chapter select menu, and although most of it is blurred out, it does reveal the names of the main chapters in Double Exposure. If we look closely, we can see that chapter 1 is called Still Life, chapter 2 is called Penumbra. The subchapters of chapter 2 are also listed here as Table for 3, By the Horns, Leaving Nothing Overlooked and Avoiding Detection. Chapter 3 is Spin, chapter 4 Diptych, and chapter 5 is Decoherence. On the save menu, we can see that one of the subchapters for Still Life is called Out of the Gutter, and Penumbra has a subchapter titled Photo Finished. There is also an indicator of what timeline the save took place in, with dead status being listed on the bottom. The names of these chapters are very intriguing and actually tell us a lot about what we might be able to expect going into them. They also seem to refer to photography and quantum mechanics in one way or another. Being chapter 1, Still Life likely refers to the beginning of Max and Safi's story, before Safi is murdered, Still Alive, but also references Still Life photography. I do think that that scene on the roof where Safi takes the photo of her, Moses, and Max happens in this chapter. We know that Max had the ability to travel through photos in Life is Strange 1, and although we aren't sure if she's still able to do this in Double Exposure, I do want to point out that Still Life photography focuses on image preservation, capturing and documenting everyday moments. I do think that this photo is going to be important, especially since it was the last documented moment of Safi being alive. Looking at chapter 2, Penumbra comes from the Latin root umbra, which means shadow. The pen part means almost, so altogether an almost shadow or partial illumination, such as in an eclipse. This can also refer to penumbra or shadow photography. Table for 3 could be the scene where we see Max, Safi, and Safi's mom, Yasmin, at I believe the Snapping Turtle bar. And Leaving Nothing Overlooked might be where we saw Max returning to the crime scene with Loretta Rice, and where she gets held at gunpoint by who I think is Alderman. Spin could be referring to absolutely anything, but diptych is really interesting. The diptych photography technique involves displaying contrasting images side by side and in a single or unified frame to help create a story in symmetry and pattern, a complete narrative in a single frame. So two different objects or photos brought together to create one. And I do have a theory about this. We have so much to cover, so I'll try to be quick, but there's just so much to talk about, guys. Okay, diptych. In Life is Strange 1, we saw that Max using her powers led to devastating consequences in the environment. And at one point, there are 2 moons in the sky, the brief blending of 2 realities. This phenomenon also occurs in Double Exposure, with 2 moons, pink and blue, which likely represent the Safi alive and Safi dead timelines. If diptych involves the combination of 2 things, merging 2 objects together, this may be where Max's actions, constantly switching between timelines, causes some kind of break or overlap, a devastating consequence between both timelines, causing them to merge or even shatter apart. And chapter 5 being called Decoherence makes me lean into this further. In quantum physics, coherence is the information that is held in a quantum system. Decoherence happens when that system interacts with and gets mixed up with its environment. The larger system or environment completely overwhelms the other, making them impossible to separate or tell them apart. In the context of Life is Strange, perhaps we get some kind of jacked up, blended nightmare reality that Max needs to fix. And while this is terrifying for Max's sake, we did see the consequences of using her powers in season 1, and we know how that all ended. And it makes sense that her jumping between realities would cause some kind of severe reaction in the universe. Now, getting into the actual gameplay. The panel focused on the avoiding detection scene of chapter 2. Moses has texted Max that he's in trouble and needs some kind of help, and that's what we dive in. When Max arrives on the scene, she finds Moses sitting anxiously outside of his office, and upon speaking to him, she learns that he took Safi's camera from the crime scene and stashed it somewhere in his office, which Detective Alderman wants to search. If Alderman finds Safi's camera, Moses will be more suspect than he already is, so Max decides to use her power to help him out. Really quickly, I want to point out the UI indicator that's between the dialogue options and on the top of the screen that lets you know which reality you're in. This is a talkable feature to help if you get confused or if you want to avoid Max messing up when talking to characters in both timelines, because yes, you can get confused if you're not paying attention to which timeline you're in. This is a really nice feature for accessibility, and I like that you're given the option for a more tailored experience. Once Max is out of range of Alderman, we get to see her powers unveiled. And guys, initially I was kind of iffy about not having rewind anymore, but Max's power is actually really cool, and I was wiggling in my chair out of excitement when I saw it for the first time. Seeing it in a trailer is one thing, but the gameplay really sold it for me. We know that there are two components to Max's power: pulsing and shifting. If rewind is moving backwards, shifting is moving sideways. Pulsing allows Max to detect spots where she can shift in the environment and gives her a glimpse at people and objects in the other timeline. And when shifting, she can instantly travel to the opposite timeline. In the new gameplay, we see what that looks like in real time. When Max pulses, there are visible changes in the environment. While our Moses is being interrogated by Alderman, Moses in the opposite timeline is working on his telescope. Using the shift spot, Max travels to the other timeline where Safi is alive and is able to speak to this Moses and get help finding the camera. Moses needs help with his telescope first, and by pulsing again, Max is able to detect the Allen wrench in the other timeline and bring it to him. We can pulse anywhere in the world and even listen in on conversations that can assist us in our investigation. And Max, being as nosy as she is, I'm curious to see just how much non-investigative things we can use our power for. I also really like how the pulsing takes into account the smaller details and includes visual clues, such as the door to Moses's cabinet being locked or open depending on the timeline you're in, and how the shift spots have different colors to let you know which timeline you're entering. The Safi dead shift point has a blue aura, while the Safi alive one has a happier yellow one. This also goes for pulsing in general. When peeking into the happier timeline, everything is highlighted in yellow, while the other one is depression hour. After helping Moses, we find out that he hides his secret tea kettle in the cabinet, which, by the way, I thought the kettle was a Dalek from Doctor Who. I don't think it is, but I almost freaked out because I love those things. Anyway, once she discovers the safe star, Max heads back to the other timeline, and I want to talk a little bit about the photo opportunity here. There are no longer any cutscenes, and instead, Max's photography is now interactive. Players will be able to take their own photos and even double expose them, which is quite fitting if you ask me. Photos relating to the investigation will be put in Max's journal, while the more fun ones you can find around Caladan will be uploaded to Crosstalk, the social media site Max uses, and Crosstalk seems to be a more advanced version of My Block from True Colors, and while Alex didn't get much use out of it other than really looking at things, in Double Exposure, on Crosstalk, Max will be able to upload her own photos, and characters in the world will even interact with them, which is super cool. And while the gameplay we were shown at PAX takes place during the Sacrifice Chloe timeline, I can't wait to see what Chloe thinks of all the pictures Max takes in the Bay timeline. I can just imagine her comments.
You know I'm hotter than those Seattle art holes, right?
Once Max identifies where the camera is located and heads over, Alderman walks in and we get to see Max Caulfield stealthing. Yes, there are stealth missions in Life is Strange Double Exposure, but that's not even the most bizarre thing. When trying to get past Alderman, she gets caught red-handed and rewinds time. Rewinds time. I have a lot of feelings about this, especially after we were told that Max could no longer rewind. While her power has evolved into what it is now, it seems that her rewind has become more passive, and although no longer center stage, it will come into play. Maybe not outside of bypassing a reload screen, but it will still be present. This really caught my attention, especially when it comes to what this means for Max. It seems that it isn't that she can no longer rewind, but it has more to do with the trauma associated with her power, to the point where it's almost dormant unless she absolutely has to use it. And I know that in this case, this is used as a reset for the stealth section, but I really hope that this is brought up later in game. This feels important. If you're not one for stealthing though, there are multiple ways to tackle this puzzle. And instead of sneaking around, Max uses her shifting ability to bypass aldermen and set up a distraction. But what I want to focus on next is our first look at Max's power evolving in game. At this point in the gameplay, Max accidentally alerts aldermen when she pushes the dolly.
Stupid telescope! Why couldn't Moses have put you together in this timeline?
And right after saying this, the telescope parts begin to glow this ominous red, and she is somehow able to shift the telescope that Moses already put together in the other timeline into this one. Max is able to completely shift objects without having to shift herself. This chapter takes place early on, and Max is as surprised as we are. But I was instantly reminded of one of my favorite things about previous Life is Strange games, which was how the powers evolve over time. This wasn't really present in True Colors, and I missed it a lot. I can't wait to see the extent of her new abilities. Like, can you imagine like, hey Max, what's that suspicious bag you're holding? What bag? Like, I don't know, shifting objects seems cool. I'm excited. With Alderman distracted by the telescope, Max is able to retrieve the camera and effectively save Moses in the process, but not before being interrogated herself, and here we get to see the major choice selection screen for Life is Strange Double Exposure, and it's quite different, but is very similar to what we saw in True Colors. Very minimalistic with a monochrome filter. And I'm trying not to compare too many details to the OG, especially when it comes to analyzing and reviewing the game, because Season 1 and Double Exposure are by two completely different devs, but it is a direct sequel, so I tend to think back to Season 1. But this screen is very clean, and the monochrome filter definitely makes it look super dramatic. In the next scene, Max presents Safi's camera to Moses, and the gameplay ends here, but there are a few other details that I want to discuss with you guys, especially when it comes to Max's crosstalk, which we did get a much better look at. The devs didn't say much about this, and we'll have to wait until the full game is out to explore all that it has to offer. As I mentioned before, Max can not only post her own photos, but we get to check out posts from other characters. There are some new faces here on the feed: the Abraxas Society from the Caladon trailer, Diamond, Reggie, the highly theorized Loretta Rice, but there is also Joyce, who made a post about missing Chloe during the holidays. She says, "It's been years since my Chloe passed, but every Christmas I still laugh when I remember her poking holes in her presents for a sneak peek." She also mentions that Chloe did this well into her teens. So cute and very Chloe. The second post on Joyce's profile starts with, "Ever since I retired, living alone has been lonely." I almost cried seeing all of this, but that's okay. Max better be able to call her, that's all I'm saying. Victoria is also on crosstalk at VChase Photography, and looking at her profile, just like Max, she's making big moves in the world, photographing images for Gaze magazine. I really hope that we get more insight on the people that Max has kept in touch with depending on your choices. It'd be really cool to be able to have a conversation with, and if not, at least see what these characters are getting up to. Max's social media and text messages will change depending on what timeline you're in. This is reflective of the emphasis Life is Strange Double Exposure places on characters and exploration. The developers encourage you to connect with Max, with her world, describing every press of a button as an opportunity to learn about the characters, to learn through the game's environments, through puzzles, interactions, and exploration. The mystery element of Double Exposure aims to enhance this. Max is investigating the murder of Safi, and by looking at objects, engaging with characters, learning more about them as she puts the clues together, it all leads back to that immersive focus. Max. And this doesn't just apply to the characters we see in Max's phone. We can expect to see various dynamics within the cast at large, which includes undergraduates like Max's students, graduates such as Max's friends, Safi and Moses, and staff like the university's president, aka Safi's mom, who I am still very suspicious about. I might have to make a theory video on this. I'm getting some interesting vibes from this lady, just putting it out there for now. Max isn't exempt either, and there is so much we're yet to learn about her as well. Max is clearly much more confident in her own skin, and is described as being very self-aware about her power, having had years to reflect on her abilities. The devs mentioned that Max's new story will be darker, and that the surrealism, the supernatural, will take place even earlier than in previous games, because of those years of reflection and self-awareness. Because Max has experienced this all before. These dark themes are considered carefully. None of this will be thrown in lightly or without purpose. And Max is at a point where she is reliving her trauma, where she will need to share more about her power with her peers, more than she's done in the past, which will lead to healthy connections for Max and will tap further into that emotional vulnerability. Beyond gameplay, fans were able to ask a few questions at the end of the panel, and we did learn a few new details, such as the fact that there will be no returning artists from Life is Strange 1. I was kind of hoping for some Angus and Julie Stone. And that we can likely expect more comics and other content in the future regarding characters in the franchise. But what stood out to me most was that it was implied that we might also learn the origin of Max's power and how she got them, and that seasons might have a role to play. Just like in Life is Strange 2, how Daniel got his power around Halloween, in Life is Strange Double Exposure, Max gets her new power around Christmas time. I'm curious about this, but I really liked how Life is Strange 1 embraced the mystery aspect of the power and the storm. And because of this, players themselves were able to connect with the story and fill in those blanks on their own. There are so many theories about why Max got her power, why the storm happened, the lessons behind it all, and what it meant for Max and her journey. The unknown was what made Life is Strange 1 and 2 such powerful stories. So I'm hoping that Double Exposure doesn't reveal too much in that sense. We didn't get any information about Chloe beyond the fact that she's either alive or not, depending on your choices. Sigh. But the content creator known as Zach Pack, shout out to Zach by the way, who's a real one for giving us this info. Zach actually got to play what was shown in PAX in the form of a hands-on demo and revealed that in Max's journal, in the Sacrifice Chloe ending, many of Max's journal entries are dedicated to Chloe. She writes about how much she misses her and how much losing Chloe has affected her. One of the journal pages in particular is also scribbled out as if Max was angry or upset. So this is another example of the references to Chloe that we can expect to see, at least in the Sacrifice Chloe ending of the game. It's not much, but it's something, and tells us that even after all these years, even after 10 years, Chloe is still very much an important part of Max's life. Chloe has not been forgotten. And while I am completely behind seeing a new version of Max that's grown over the past 10 years, which makes sense as Max is now an adult in a different stage of her life, I'm really hoping that Max's trauma, especially, is explored beyond journal entries, and the weight of her choices is reflected throughout the game. I'd love to get more insight on what Max thinks about Chloe or Arcadia Bay, the people she lost to the storm, and how this has influenced who she's become, how she feels, why she chose to start using her powers again, how she justifies it after what happened, and where this anger, these emotions stem from. The Max who sacrificed Arcadia Bay and the Max who sacrificed Chloe would be two completely different people, and I hope the true weight of that is felt during the game. If Chloe is alive, for example, how would Max's journal reflect this? Would she write about Arcadia Bay, about the storm? Would she write general notes instead? Would those letters to Chloe simply be absent, or perhaps would she be writing to someone else, perhaps even Safi? Max's journal, at least in the Sacrifice Chloe gameplay, seems to be a mirror of Chloe's in Before the Storm, so I'm curious about all these changes. The other hands-on previews that I read were mainly positive and made me feel very hopeful for what's to come. Max was described as recognizable in both appearance and personality.
So I found this guy named Alan, but he didn't know anything about a wrench.
No, Max, not literally Alan. It's...
Other characters such as Moses felt deep and fleshed out, sparking genuine curiosity and interest in the future cast. The game's fidelity received high praise, especially when it comes to the beautiful environments and character movements. Many players felt implored to explore and admire the details in each setting. The puzzle elements were described as fun rather than tedious, and the differences between timelines felt wonderfully illustrated, and navigating them felt intuitive. And you guys know that I am excited, and I can't wait to be able to play the game alongside the community to discuss it with you all. But I will say that I do hope that we get some kind of mention of the Bay ending in the marketing before the game comes out. Everything that we've seen so far has been in the Sacrifice Chloe ending. I don't need an entire scene because I do want to be surprised, but like her profile on crosstalk or some kind of acknowledgement would be nice at this point, especially since we already know she's alive. Just saying, there's no need to hide her. Let me see my girl. But guys, honestly, after waiting almost 10 years and seeing Max again, I just know that seeing Chloe is gonna be a very emotional moment, just seeing these two together after so long. And these previews for real got me on the edge of my seat. I'll say it again, the world is not ready for Pricefield in 2024, okay? Can you imagine these two together? The banter! It's gonna be so good. Alright guys, that's all I've got regarding Double Exposure and the new gameplay at PAX West 2024. I would love to know your thoughts on the new gameplay. Are you excited, and did the new gameplay ease any worries or answer questions that you had? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more Life is Strange content like this in the future, please consider hitting subscribe. It really helps to support the channel. I will be covering Life is Strange Double Exposure up until release, and I look forward to making content on the game once it's finally out next month. As we get closer by the day, I am both nervous and excited for Max and the future of the franchise. There's so much to look forward to, and the best part, seeing it alongside you guys, the shared excitement, the reactions, all that's to come. We waited so long. I feel so hopeful, and I genuinely can't wait. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye.